Hello there, YouTube. This is Jins talking, and we're going to be going over a couple of my hunter builds. Planning on doing a video for each class, but we figured we'd just start on the hunter because I don't know, it's as good a place as any. So yeah, let's go over my solar build and what I like to use, especially in some harder content. One of my favorite builds, by far since they finally fixed it, is the Caliban's Hand. This improves the proximity knife and gives you like increased melee regeneration if you miss your knife, and causes everything to go boom if you do. Yeah, it scorches targets, it damages on explosions, or ignites the targets on final blows. This makes for a very efficient ad clear, and yeah, it does excellent work. As far as stats that I'm prioritizing, resilience is always a must. I'm running a high discipline stat for my healing grenade. Decent melee strength, or like a melee stat, so that way I can get my knife back if I miss. Mobility is kind of meh. Recovery is just kind of there. Intellect, no one uses intellect. It's a garbage tier perk because you can just use primary damage to just generate your supers anyways. Um, let's go over the subclass, what fragments and aspects I like using. Gambler's Dodge is always great for like just dodging next to an enemy, getting your throwing knife back. Once again, we're using the proximity explosive knife. Healing grenade. Aspects, we're going to be using knock them down for two aspects, or two parts. One, to make our blade barrage launch more projectiles, and while radiant, our final blows are going to make our throwing knife fully refund itself, which is awesome because that means you just constantly can just keep igniting everything in the room. On your mark, this is just to give us more fragment slots. You could go with the Gunpowder Gamble, which is still really strong. Yeah, other than that, so we'll talk about our fragments. We got Ember of Torches to make us radiant, Ember of Char to make our ignitions, which from our throwing knife will spread Scorch to affected targets. We have Ember of Ashes to stack more stacks of Scorch, an Ember of Eruptions to make those ignitions have an increased effect, meaning we set the world on fire. Lastly, we're going to be running Ember of Empyrean. You can swap this out for something else if you want, like Ember of Singeing or Ember of Solace. I like it because I can keep a permanent uptime on my Restoration and Radiant via my abilities. And it's amazing. It'll help you ad clear an entire room, and meanwhile you're perfectly safe while doing it. Running stuff like the Callus Mini Tool or the BXR or the Fixed Odds for weapons. Pretty much any weapon with incandescent will work, just to constantly be applying Scorch, and yeah, you can chain ignitions very quickly. Alright, now let's look at my Arcstrider build. Run a couple different exotics for this one. I've been really enjoying the skip grenades this season. Really fun. This will improve your skip grenade and make you'll gain an additional one. Skip grenades will now return energy whenever they damage enemies, so kind of can build on itself. You still have the combination blow in this. It's just not as strong like with Liar's Handshake, which is another build that you can use. I kind of stopped using because in end level content, running up and meleeing everything's not typically the smartest thing to do. You can use things like the new sidearm if you got one with like Volt Shot, or the new Scout to proc Jolt a little bit more. Other than that, let's look at the subclass. Gambler's Dodge, once again, to pair with Combination Blow. This allows you to generate a melee dodge melee combo to stack up high damage melees. This is for just helpful for dealing with trash ads where you don't want to throw your skip. Skip grenades, obviously, is part of the exotic. We have two aspects. We're going to be rocking Flow State and Lethal Current. They kind of build in towards more of a melee focus, I feel. Defeating a jolted target makes you amplified. When you're amplified, your dodge recharges more quickly, and you are more resilient while dodging, and your reload speed is greatly increased. It's actually pretty insane, obviously. Lethal Current, this is after you dodging, your next melee attack has increased range, jolts targets and causes a damaging aftershock. Damaging any jolted target with a melee attack also blinds them. This is like Dune Marchers for the Titan, from the best that I can see, and it is insane. It'll clear trash ads easily. That's why I like going with this over the Liar's Handshake build, because then you got the skip grenades for higher health targets. Fragments, rocking Spark of Resistance it's probably one of the best Arc 3.0 fragments out there. Spark of Shock, your arc grenades will now jolt targets, and by jolting targets you're going to create ionic traces, so the whole build's feeding you ionic traces. Lastly, we just got Spark of Recharge. That's just to give you a little bit more grenade energy whenever you get critically wounded, break your shields. There's a lot of other fragments you can run. Like Spark of Feedback is also really good. I hear that they're working on fixing that one. Even Spark of Beacons is also really strong. On our Void subclass, I run a multitude of different setups for this. My go-to for pretty much most end-level content is going to be my Omnioculus build. This exotic is insane. It is by far one of the best hunter exotics for the Night Stalker, in my opinion. You gain a second smoke bomb charge and have damage resist while you're invisible. This applies to any invisibility, including your teammates making you invisible. And then when you make an ally invisible, they gain the damage resist while invisible. And you gain melee energy back, so by making two allies invis, you're going to refund your smoke charge. This was kind of broken in PvP. I'm not a PvP person, I do PvE content. So, but it's still insane. Now, as far as stats, I would love to see a higher mobility stat and a higher strength stat, as well as the tier 10 resilience. This really just, when you're stacking tier 10 resilience with the Omnioculus damage resist and then your normal resist, you're quite tanky and can eat a lot of damage. Now this is for, I call it like the last man standing build, because you're usually the last man standing with this much amount of invisibility, and then you can pick up your teammates and get them back into the fight. Also making them invisible to give them damage resist on top of their overshield, and then allowing them to get safely back to cover before they get back in the fight. As far as fragments and aspects go, I really like Gambler's Dodge. I mean, Marksman Dodge is great, but Gambler's is just so good, especially refunding your smokes. And then also later on in our aspects, it'll show you that we make ourselves invisible while doing it. So it's just so good. Snare, and then I personally like to use Vortex. You can also use things like suppressor grenades or like whatever grenade. Vortex is my personal favorite though. Vanishing Step and Trapper's Ambush. Vanishing Step makes us dodge invisible, and then Trapper's Ambush makes our snare into a invis smoke bomb. And then as far as fragments are concerned, we have Echo of Persistence to make our buffs last longer. Echo of Obscurity to make our finishers give us invisibility. This is also very important when using things like Aeons, or just if you see a finishable enemy, just to easily just finish it, go invisible, recover your health, Lastly, I use Echo of Undermining. This is just my debuff of the class. Void's excellent at using debuff grenades. And personally, I like it best with the Vortex Grenade. You could opt for something else if you wanted to switch up your grenades, like a suppressor. You might, go with something else. Um, but yeah, this is my last man standing build. I use the Mobius Quiver to pretty much just burst damage. You can also use the Deadfall Tether to, kind of group up a bunch of enemies. I typically just will use my Vortex Grenade in that case. It just pulls everything in. Lastly, we have Stasis. I typically don't run Stasis unless I'm in like a raid scenario for this. They kind of nerfed the exotic Renewal Grasp a little bit. This is more like a Font of Might build. And with elemental time dilation. It's pretty much just for running like stasis damaging weapons, like something like Thoughtless or Reed's Regret, something like that. For things like War Priest, where it's harder to generate elemental wells to boost your damage. Just my stasis swap set. As far as the super in aspects and all that stuff are concerned, once again, I think Gambler's Dodge is just the best, just giving you your shuriken back. Duskfield grenades are kind of pairs with the exotic, kind of gives you a little damage resist while you're playing the game neutrally. I like to actually switch to this class and not just switch once I've used whatever I needed to. Grim Harvest, defeating slow to frozen combatants, create stasis shards. We take advantage of that, making Font of Might out of those to do a mod. They also give melee energy to your allies, but Touch of Winter, this buffs your Duskfield grenade, giving it a little crystal, which you can then break to proc Whisper of Shards to have better grenade recharge. Also running Whisper of Fissures. This is more of a neutral game perk to just allow you to clear ads a little easier. Whisper of Conduction just makes your shards track to you, and also really good stats. Whisper of Change is a little bit more damage resist. Pair that with your gauntlets, And then lastly, with a Whisper of Impetus. This will say that whenever you're damaging targets with your stasis melee, it'll reload all your stowed weapons and grant you a temporary boost to weapon ready speed. What I use this for is using shurikens to reload my weapons. So that way I don't have to. You just swap to an off weapon like your primary and then throw a shuriken, reload your special and heavy. Bada bing, bada boom. Instant fucking reload. Other than that, the build is, like I said, mostly used for my DPS phases. I don't typically use it, but it's got some good, like, survivability. And then, yeah. So those are the 4 main builds that I run on my Hunter. If you'd like to see something more specific, go ahead and let me know in the comment section down below. If you learned something about, a new build or whatnot that you previously hadn't really contemplated, go ahead and give me a like, comment, subscribe, We're just trying to get out there and show people some cool builds. I'll be doing my Warlock next. It's got to be one of my favorite characters. So yeah. That's going to do it for the video. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one.